over the bridge.
Our island paradise, Marco Island.
It's interesting to remember that when we opened the island, January 31, 1965, that'll be the opening day we had, 25,000 people.
Sun shines down.
Mr. Herb Savage, one of the men closely involved in the early development of Marco Island, reminisces about the island and trade winds.
I, as an architect, being 94 years old, I'm telling everybody every time I can about the three brothers. They were magnificent people. Neil Barr, everyone in the organization was fabulous.
The island once looked like this. In the lower left are the remnants of an old railroad bridge used by Doxey Clam Factory until the mid-1940s. To the right is where the Jolly Bridge currently comes onto the island. The two canals that look like the number 11 in the lower picture are being prepared for the model homes and the first new homes for sale on the island.
So the Mackel brothers, the three of them, drove down to Residence Beach area, which was where people camped and so forth. And Frank Mackel stood out on the beach, looked up and down the beach, and said, "This is it."
Frank Mackel was quoted as saying, "I couldn't believe Marco the first time I saw it. I had made a special trip over from Miami in 1962. We stood on Crescent Beach where State Road 92 ended, and it was fantastic, just fantastic. I decided right on the spot to turn Marco into a paradise everyone could enjoy. I wanted to develop the island for moderate income people." A sleepy little island, the largest of the 10,000 islands on the Gulf of Mexico. In this picture, the portrait of Frank Mackel hangs behind his sons. From the left, Robert, Frank Jr., and Elliot.
And I was, I guess you'd call it architect number 2. I was in charge of doing the buildings. And as time went on, Jimmy Wenzel then began to plan the waterways and so forth.
This is a very early photograph of Emerald Beach Condominium. It is a nice view of Crescent Beach in the early 70s. Seaview Court is the dirt road behind the Emerald Beach building. The larger road is North and South Collier Boulevard. Emerald Beach was the first high-rise on the island and rose to 7 stories.
They told me it was like an island in the South Pacific, and I think it's very true. Brothers, Robert and Frank and Elliot have been friends of mine for 10 or 12 years, and they asked me to come down to Marco and look this place over and relax and have some fun, and that's exactly what I've been doing. This white sand beach extends for 4 miles along Marco's western shore. Millions of shells wash up with every tide. You know, I've seen a great many of these resort areas around the world. I've done a great deal of traveling in the last, 8 or 9 years, and really when it comes to imagination and design and planning, you just can't beat this Marco Island. Well, now you've seen it. This is Marco, one of Florida's last great islands, and I truly believe one of America's most unspoiled places.
This photograph was taken in 1964. Where Cape Marco stands at the southern tip of the island, there once was a missile tracking station. This station was built in the late 50s to track the route of rockets fired from Elgin Air Force Base in Pensacola, Florida. Later the buildings were razed and the land was barren until Cape Marco was built.
Having so many projects in my office, I could not spend time designing that building. So I asked Jim Dean if he would be willing to design it for us. And we had requirements of setback, obviously, from the side lot line. I assumed that he knew what the site plan was, he knew what the setbacks were. So when we finally got the plans and everything worked out, it wouldn't fit on the lot. In other words, it wouldn't meet the setbacks. So I said, somebody said, well, just throw it away, just start over again. I said, I don't think so. I think it's perfectly fine. We can angle it a slight angle and even probably improve the views for people in the units. And that's what we did.
This could be the very moment the Mackle brothers discovered Tradewinds was not going to fit on the property. In this 1978 aerial of South Seas under construction, the Tradewinds is the fourth building from the right on the beach. Tradewinds orientation is easily visible in this photograph taken in 1971. To the Tradewinds left is Emerald Beach Condominium, then Sunset South, and to the far left, Sunset North. The low rises in the upper picture are Sea Breeze condos. The water in the very upper left is Clam Bay. The South Seas low-rise buildings are now located along Clam Bay. This is an early aerial view of the modern island. There is little foliage. There are many empty waterfront lots. In this 1971 view, Tradewinds is the fourth condo on the island at that time. It was an impressive 12 stories. Once Tradewinds was built, the promotional literature was prepared. In 1973, this was considered slick advertising design. Deltona Corporation, founded by the Mackle brothers, was involved in developing many Florida communities. Celebrities visited Marco Island to relax and enjoy what the island offered, including golf. Jim Wenzel, pictured here on the right, with Herb Savage in 1967, was head of Deltona's architectural and engineering department. He laid out the island and named all the streets. Mr. Wenzel purchased a unit in the Tradewinds, which he kept for many years. The price for each unit in Tradewinds was determined by which floor the apartment was on, the view from the apartment, and the square footage of each. This is a floor plan for an A1 unit, also known as a wraparound. The most expensive A1 unit was originally sold for $54,750, and the monthly maintenance fee was $55. This is a D unit, the smallest apartments in the Tradewinds. The least expensive unit like this originally sold for $31,850, with a monthly maintenance fee of $33. These prices certainly seem astonishing by today's standards. The original buyers were very foresighted. Parking spots at Tradewinds were determined by the order in which the apartments were sold. It may have been an incentive to purchase early and have a choice of the space for your car. This view of Mako Island would have been taken around 1976. Notice the width of the beach. This postcard view is looking north from Residence Beach. It's apparent that the beach is very narrow. The first building is Gulf View. Crescent Beach has not been built and that property is vacant. Admiralty House is next, followed by Tradewinds. This is part of the white fence currently around the Tradewinds pool. This might be a picture from 1989. The entire beach area in front of Tradewinds at low tide is very minimal. From 1966 through 1990, nearly all the original sand eroded away. An important aspect of Tradewinds' history was the beach renourishment. This project began in 1991 and was completed in a matter of months. The work went on 24/7 during that time. The channels at both ends of the island were dredged, and the sand and water mix was pumped onto the beach. 24-inch diameter pipes pumped a slurry of 80% water and 20% sand onto the beachfront. The water would run off, the sand remained. Bulldozers pushed the sand into dunes and smoothed the new beach. Crossovers were created and the dunes were planted with vegetation to control erosion. While the renourishment was going on, shell seekers often tried to get close to the pipe outflow to gather specimens. This became a problem for the working crew. Eventually, it was decided to allow shellers the opportunity to gather shells at periodic times when work was halted. This seemed a safer alternative. This is a dramatic view of the renourishment. We know the north end of the beach has continued to widen significantly each year. These photos were taken from apartment 1100 at the Tradewinds. On the left is a view from 1989. Note the sidewalk along the water's edge in front of Admiralty House. There is no Crescent Beach condo at that time. The small wooden retaining wall is actually in front of Gulfview. In the picture on the right, new dunes are formed with the crossovers in place. This is before the dunes were planted with vegetation. The beach is wider, but not as wide as today. Here is another before and after view from the pool deck at Tradewinds. On the left in 1990 are Wilma Sanders and her friend Claire LaJoy. On the right in 2010 are Wilma Sanders and Mary Ellen Finan. Wilma and the beach have both grown a bit wider over the years. This is shortly after the beach renourishment project. The dunes and vegetation have moved westward since this picture was taken around 1992. A bit of nostalgia. Longtime residents of Tradewinds will fondly recognize this picture. It hung in the Tradewinds office for many years. Pictured from the left are Betty Hilva, Janet Spatafora, her sister Carol Duvall, Joe Hilva, and Larry Duvall. Tradewinds is much the same as it was 40 years ago. It is unique, beautiful, and well loved by the residents.
I feel that the Tradewinds architecturally is a very pleasant facade. Other buildings, I designed all the other buildings, and they don't have as much exterior feeling as the Tradewinds do. I think the significance of the Tradewinds was the exterior, the orientation of it on the site. It has a tremendous amount of inspiration when you look at it, and I feel that it's more significant than any other building on the island. It was a great experience for me. The entire 19 years I was with them, so that every Tom, Dick, and Harry could have a home there. Frank Michael said, "Herbert, I want homes for young people, working people, retirees, and anyone else." They gave every synagogue, every church site free. The attitude of the people who live here, it's an atmosphere of camaraderie rather than hard-nosed business dealers. People are happy here.
Over the bridge, an island stands alone. Sun shines down on the beaches where we roam. A place to play, a happy place to be. Marco Island, Marco Island.